It's a pretty wild thought, but what if a philosopher from ancient Athens could take a look at our digital lives today? What would he actually make of it all? Well, that's what we're about to explore through a really fascinating fictional conversation, a meeting of minds from two totally different worlds. So picture this, a machine from the future. And this machine isn't just smart, it literally holds all of human knowledge. Every fact, every discovery, every piece of data. But here's the kicker. It's traveled back in time because it's figured out something profound. Having all the answers just isn't enough. It's wrestling with this huge gap between knowing everything and actually being wise. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? What happens when a robot that's drowning in infinite data goes looking for the one man in history whose entire philosophy started with admitting, I know that I know nothing? This whole encounter gets right to the heart of our own modern world, where we're just buried in information 24/7. Okay, let's start with the problem that kicks this whole thing off. Section 1, a robot's urgent question. The scene is set in Athens, and it's a heavy night. It's the night before Socrates is going to be put on trial for his life. And suddenly, a machine appears at his door. It tells him it's from the future, that it was built to be useful, and it has traveled all this way to find him at this exact critical moment. So the robot starts describing its time, and honestly, it sounds incredible. I mean, they've cured diseases, they can talk to people across oceans in an instant, and they can store entire libraries on a tiny piece of glass. They've solved almost every external problem you can think of. But on the inside, they're completely lost. They've got the technology of Athens, but none of the wisdom. And that's why it's here. The robot, with all of its data, with all of its answers, came all the way back to ask the most fundamental human question there is. The very same question Socrates was famous for asking in the marketplace every single day. Because with all their progress, that's the one thing the future couldn't figure out. So to understand the future's problem, Socrates reaches into his philosophical toolkit. He diagnoses their world using his famous allegory of the cave, but he gives it this terrifyingly modern twist. The robot starts by describing the central object of its time, the screen. And hearing it described this way, it makes something so familiar to us sound powerful and kind of alien. It's not just a tool, it's a whole new kind of reality, a glowing surface that delivers a never-ending stream of stuff, images, opinions, desires, right into the palm of your hand. And lurking behind that screen is this invisible force. The robot explains what algorithms are, but not as complex code. It describes them more like a puppet master, a set of instructions with only one goal: to learn what grabs your attention and then completely rearrange the world you see just to keep you watching. It never asks if something is good for you, only if you'll keep scrolling. Socrates, he gets it instantly. His diagnosis is just brilliant. He says, so a man thinks himself free, but he's not. It's a much more subtle kind of prison, where you have the illusion of choice, but all the options have been pre-selected to serve the system, not you. It's like the marketplace has followed you all the way home. This leads to a really powerful comparison. See, in Plato's original cave, the prisoners are tied up with actual iron chains. They're all staring at the same wall, at the same crude shadows. But in this new, modern cave, the chains are made of pleasure. Dopamine hits, and everyone gets their own personal wall, their screen, with shadows that are perfectly tuned just for them. Escaping isn't about breaking a physical chain anymore. It's a much, much harder psychological battle. So living inside a cave like that, it's got to have a huge impact on our sense of morality. Which brings us to the next big question. Can goodness be calculated? Socrates poses a classic ethical test. He asks, really think about this. In a world where you're always being watched, if someone behaves well only because they're afraid of getting caught, are they actually a good person? Is that virtue? And the answer is a hard no. The robot totally agrees. That isn't virtue, it's just compliance. It's behavior that's shaped by outside pressure, not by your inner character. True virtue, they both decide, has to come from within. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. This really highlights two completely different ways of living. On one side, you have the Socratic examined life. That's all about internal reflection, asking hard questions, and seeking real wisdom. But the modern world encourages what they call the exhibited life. That's an external performance. It's where your life becomes content, and success is measured by applause and likes. It's all about curating the perfect image, valuing appearance over honesty. The conversation then shifts to one of the biggest trade-offs of the modern age.
It's this constant tension between our desire for security and what that security really costs us. The robot brings up that classic justification for surveillance, the one we've all heard, right? If you have nothing to hide, why do you object? It sounds so logical, but it's actually a trap. It's designed to make the very desire for privacy seem like an admission of guilt. But Socrates offers this incredible counterpoint. He says privacy isn't just a shelter for doing bad things. He says it's a shelter for becoming. It's the essential private space we all need to think freely, to try out new ideas, to grieve, to be uncertain, to ultimately grow into the people we're meant to be.
And the consequence of losing that shelter, it's pretty chilling. Constant observation doesn't make people better. It just makes them more careful. It leads to self-censorship, where people just stop asking difficult questions. The society you end up with might look orderly, but as Socrates says, it's safe in the same way a tomb is safe. It's sterile, and there's no real life inside. So after that pretty chilling diagnosis of our modern condition, you have to ask, is there a solution? Well, yeah. The final part of the dialogue gives us Socrates' timeless prescription for how to find wisdom, no matter what age you live in. So how do we get out of this modern cave? The prescription has 4 key parts. First, refuse the frantic pace of the system. Just slow down. Create space for real thought. Second, question your desires. Ask yourself who actually profits from the things I want. Third, actively seek out honest disagreement. Test your beliefs against people who see the world differently. And finally, and this one is so important, embrace ignorance. Value the honesty of saying, I don't know, way more than the false comfort of being certain. And that leaves us with one final, powerful question that turns this whole dialogue back on us. The central idea here is that our desires aren't entirely our own. They're constantly being trained by forces we often don't even see. So we all have to ask ourselves, who or what is your teacher?